Once again, Christian greetings to all our valued listeners and viewers throughout the whole world. This is our special episode number 59 as the last final warning message. And it is a continuation concerning the subject, the deliverance of God's people. So, let's go back again to SR. To SR page 266. It says, the time for building the antitypical temple. Then it says, church. So it says here, the time for building the antitypical temple. Then I would like to read again the statement. The question before us is, when will the antitype meet its perfect fulfillment? So that is the question. The question before us is, when will the antitype meet its perfect fulfillment? So we need to focus now to the perfect fulfillment. No longer to the groundwork or to the partial fulfillment, but to the perfect fulfillment. Now let's read again the statement in 2SR 266. It says, we partially explain that the two literal temples successively built in ancient Jerusalem were types of two sections of the Christian church. So it says, there are two literal temples, by which the two literal temples, which is successively built in ancient Jerusalem, were types of two sections of the Christian church. Now, let's read 2SR 262. To SR, page 262. It says, first temple, literally greater, but the second is spiritually greater. Now, let's read the statement. There was something glorious with both temples, and the greatness of the one was as nothing in comparison with the other. The first visibly exceeded the second, and the second spiritually exceeded the first. But the glorious gift to both was unsurpassable. As the one represents the early Christian church, and the other the last section of the same church, it is evident that both sections were endowed with great glory, but the glory of the early church was literal, and of the latter spiritual according to types. Now, brothers and sisters, let us focus our attention to the statement, of the same church. Now, for example, the Apostolic Church, because this is the type. Christ's visible presence from 27 AD to 31 AD. We know that that is 3.5 years. Christ's visible presence. And then, Christ's invisible presence. So the glory of the first section of the Apostolic Church was nothing in comparison with the glory in the second section. So here, this is the second section. And that's why the statement says, the same church. So this illustration is pointing to the antitypical house of David. The antitypical house of David. Because this one is the typical house of David. Although, here the visible presence of Jesus Christ, the apostles visibly saw the presence of Jesus Christ. They could touch Jesus Christ. They could talk to Jesus Christ. But in the antitype, although the presence of Jesus Christ is on the earth, but we cannot visibly show the presence of Jesus Christ. So, we term it Christ's invisible presence. But in reality, the visible presence of Jesus Christ is on the earth. But the only thing is that we cannot see Him in our visible eyes. So this is the first section of the antitypical house of David, when Jesus Christ was still on the earth. And the second section is at the time when Jesus Christ will return to the heavenly sanctuary. So that's what it means by the word the same church. So I would like to read again. The statement on 2SR. In page 262, it says, as the one represents the early Christian church, and the other, the last section of the same church. 2SR 262. It says, as the one represents the early Christian church, and the other the last section of the same church, it is evident that both sections were endowed with great glory. But the glory of the early church was literal, and of the latter spiritual according to types. Now, let us go back again to the question, perfect fulfillment. The perfect fulfillment cannot be in the days of the apostles. That is only the partial fulfillment in its antitype. So, the statement here, in 2SR page 266, the question before us is, when will the antitype meet its perfect fulfillment? When? When will the antitype meet its perfect fulfillment? Now let us read 1 TG. Number 8. On page 27. Let's read. Zechariah chapter 6 verse 12. And speaking he unto him, 1 TG number 8, page 27. So, let us read. It says, and speak unto him, saying, thus speaketh the Lord of hosts, saying, behold the man whose name is the branch, and he shall grow up out of his place, and he shall build the temple of the Lord. So, who shall build the temple of the Lord? The man whose name is the branch. Then it says, Joshua, that is Joshua, the son of Josedek, the high priest. In Zechariah 6 verse 11, it says, then take silver and gold and make crowns and set them upon the head of Joshua, the son of Josedek, the high priest. So it is not Joshua, the son of Nun. It is Joshua, the son of Josedek, the high priest. Now let's read again the statement in 1 TG number 8, page 27. Zechariah 6, verse 12, verse 11. It says here, Joshua is well instructed that the burden and the ingenuity for building this spiritual temple. What temple? A spiritual temple belongs to him whose name is the branch. He is to grow out of his place. To him be the glory. He alone is to be exalted. He is to build the temple of the Lord. Now let us read 1 TG number 8, page 24. Who is to bring this revival and reformation, this great change? The branch. And according to Isaiah chapter 11, verse 1 to 5, the branch is the Lord, the Son of David. So who is he? That man whose name is the branch? It is Jesus Christ, the Son of Man, the Son of David. He will build the temple of the Lord. Brothers and sisters, one of the lying words is found in Jeremiah chapter 7, right? Let's read again. The consecrated way to Christian perfection. Page 71. What were specifically the lying words in which these people trusted? Here they are, trusting not in lying words, saying, the temple of the Lord, the temple of the Lord, the temple of the Lord are this. Jeremiah 7, verse 4. Now, let us go back first to the first Exodus. And focus to that song, the song of Moses. Found in Exodus chapter 15. And I would like to focus our attention to the focal point of that song. Found in Exodus 15, verse 17. Now let's read Exodus 15, verse 17. This is the focal point of that song, because song is a message. Exodus 15, verse 17, thou shalt bring them in, and plant them in the mountain of thine inheritance, in the place, O Lord, which thou hast made for thee to dwell in the sanctuary, O Lord, which thy hands have established. Exodus 15, verse 17. It says, thou shalt bring them in, and plant them in the mountain of thine inheritance, in the place, O Lord, which thou hast made for thee to dwell in the sanctuary, O Lord, which thy hands have established. That is one of the most important message called by the shepherd's rod as Stephen's sermon. Here in answerer number 2, page 5, it says, a Stephen's sermon to the church today. Stephen's sermon. And this is the message delivered by Stephen. In Acts chapter 7, it says, verse 48 and verse 49, howbeit the Most High dwelleth not in temples made with hands. Or in other words, made with hands of human being. Howbeit the Most High dwelleth not in temples made with hands, as saith the prophet, heaven is my throne, and earth is my footstool. What house will ye build me, saith the Lord? Or what is the place of my rest? And here in the writings of Wagoner, that even in the book of Psalms 48 verse 1 and 2, as well as in the book of Ezekiel, chapter, let's read. I would like to read that portion. In the book of Ezekiel. Ezekiel chapter, I think that is chapter 43. It says, as 43 verse 7, Ezekiel 43. So, let us turn to the book of Ezekiel. Ezekiel 43 verse 7. And he said unto me, Son of man, the place of my throne, and the place of the soles of my feet, where I dwell in the midst of thy children of Israel forever, and my holy name. Ezekiel 43, verse 7. Now let us read the statement here, written by wagoner. It says, after reading Ezekiel, is it 40 verse 2? After reading Ezekiel 40 verse 2, read Psalms 48 verse 1 and 2. So let us read first Ezekiel 40. Ezekiel 40 verse 2. In the visions of God brought he me into the land of Israel, and set me upon a very high mountain, by which was as the frame of a city on the south. Ezekiel 40 verse 2. Now, let's read the statement. After reading Ezekiel 40 verse 2, read Psalms 48 verse 1 and 2. Great is the Lord, and greatly to be praised in the city of our God, in the mountain of his holiness. Beautiful for situation, the joy of the whole earth is Mount Zion, on the sides of the north. The city of the great king. It was to this place that God was leading the children of Israel when he took them from Egypt. Exodus 15 verse 17. Thou shalt bring them in and plant them in the mountain of thine inheritance, in the place, O Lord, which thou hast made for thee to dwell in the sanctuary, O Lord, which thy hands have established. It is this place which Ezekiel saw, and which he has described for us with so much minuteness that our minds are overwhelmed. Of the place which Ezekiel saw, God said to him, Son of man, this is the place of my throne, and the place of the soles of my feet, where I dwell in the midst of the children of Israel forever. Ezekiel 43 verse 7. You see, brothers and sisters, from the time of the first Exodus to the vision of Ezekiel is pointing to the same thing. That is why the statement here in track number 2, it says, page 18, when will the church really become God's dwelling place? When will the church really become God's dwelling place? By human effort, it is as impossible to bring about such a change as it is to dry up the ocean. Only God can do it. But when he does, he will certainly make a clean work of it. Track number 2 on page 18. Now let's go back to our subject. Let's read again the statement in 2SR 266. It says, the question before us is, when will the antitype meet its perfect fulfillment? When will the antitype meet its perfect fulfillment? Who shall build the temple of the Lord? The branch, the man whose name is the branch, and that is Jesus Christ. Who is Jesus Christ? The Son of David. The antitypical Solomon. Therefore, that predicted spiritual temple, typifying Mount Moriah, since it is Solomon, the son of David, who built that temple in Mount Moriah, which is the type, therefore, in the antitypical spiritual temple, which is typifying Mount Moriah, it must be antitypical Solomon, the son of David, who shall build that spiritual temple in the antitypical Mount Moriah, which is that man whose name is the branch, which is Jesus Christ, the Son of David. He shall go out of his place. That is pointing to the heavenly sanctuary. Jesus Christ will go out, pointing to the vision of Ezekiel, when the majesty of the universe visits the earth. For what is the purpose? To build the spiritual temple, to build the spiritual kingdom. Now, I would like to read again the statement in tract number 1, page 5. The call of Ezekiel to the prophetic office is one of the most interesting experiences of the ancient seers, and the revelation of what he saw by the river Chebar is perhaps of greater importance to heaven and earth at this time than is any other vision on sacred record, because in a remarkable way, it reveals that which unites heaven with earth, even as the Dardanelles links two importances. Thus, this study of Ezekiel's vision, which brings to light earth being visited by the majesty of the universe. The earth is being visited by the majesty of the universe. But Christ's visitation, the same as it was on the first advent of Jesus Christ. The question is that, who shall believe our report? It says here, in Isaiah chapter 50, let us read chapter 53, verse 1. Isaiah 53, verse 1. What believe our report? Unto whom is the arm of the Lord revealed? What believe our report? Unto whom is the arm of the Lord revealed? So that is the question. Now, I would like to read to you here in 1 TG 38. page 28. Isaiah 53 verses 13 and 14. Isaiah 52 rather. Isaiah 52 verses 13 and 14. Behold, my servant shall deal prudently. He shall be exalted and extolled, and be very high. As many were astonished at thee. His visage was so marred, more than any man, and his form more than the sons of men. Now let's read the commentary given by the Shepherd's Rod in 1 TG 38:28. These verses, as you know, have long been applied to the Lord. He nevertheless does not do all these things personally, but he does them through his messengers. Now note, in verse 13, we are told that the Lord is greatly exalted, whereas in verse 14, we are told his visage was marred and his form more than the sons of men. He hath no form nor comeliness, no beauty that we should desire him. Isaiah 53 verse 2. Then it says, why? The big question is that, why? The only answer that can be given to the question is this. God knows that the people's sinful nature urges them to make idols of men. They easily fall for men who can put forth a good prompt. They act as though they were baptized in the names of these modern Pauls and Apollos. They are followers of pride and pomp rather than followers of God and His progressive truth. To break them away from this folly, God sends His truth through unsuspected ones. Thus, contrary to their liking and expectation, it is written that the Lord had no form nor comeliness, but in spite of it, He shall be exalted and extolled and be very high. (1 TG 38, page 28). So what does it mean? It's easy to understand according to the Shepherd's Rod. The messenger that God will use, there is no form of beauty or comeliness that men would desire. But the messenger that God would raise, He will exalt Jesus Christ very high. And that is the fulfillment of Micah chapter 4. As stated in the Shepherd's Rod. Now let's read 1 SR. One SR, page 173. What is the meaning of the 4th chapter of Micah? But in the last days it shall come to pass that the mountain of the house of the Lord shall be established in the top of the mountains, and it shall be exalted above the hills, and people shall flow unto it. Micah 4 verse 1. The scripture is unmistakably clear that it was intended for the last days, for it reads, but in the last days it shall come to pass. It is also positive that this scripture will be fulfilled, for it says, it shall come to pass. It is an accepted fact that nearly all Bible students agree that the mountain spoken of in this chapter is a symbol of God's church, denomination, of which the temple built in Mount Moriah was a type. The prophet declares that God's church would be established in the top of the mountains, denominations, and it shall be exalted above the hills, sect or organizations, exalted not by the world, but by the Spirit of God in power, truth, and righteousness, and people will flow unto it. God has spoken it by His holy prophet. Therefore, it would be foolish and deceptive for one to argue or try to explain away the meaning of this sacred word. The same prophecy is also described in the 2nd chapter of Isaiah, from which we quote, "The lofty looks of men shall be humbled, and the haughtiness of men shall be bowed down, and the Lord alone shall be exalted in that day." Isaiah 2 verse 11. If everything that is human would be made low and bowed down, and the Lord alone exalted in that day, one can clearly see that the prophecy is to meet its fulfillment, for the Lord is exalted on earth by His church as portrayed by the prophet Isaiah. You see, brothers and sisters, Jesus Christ will be exalted by His church. So, Micah 4 verse 1 is a prediction that Jesus Christ will be exalted by His church. I would like to read Desire of Ages. Desire of Ages on page 34. Desire of Ages, page 34. The dying words of Jacob filled them with hope. The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor a lawgiver from between his feet, until Shiloh come. The waning power of Israel testified that the Messiah's coming was at hand. The prophecy of Daniel pictured the glory of his reign over an empire which should succeed all earthly kingdoms, and say the prophet, it shall stand forever. Daniel 2, verse 44. So here, there's for prophecy attached Genesis 49, verse 10 to the prophecy on Daniel 2, verse 44. Because that prophecy on Daniel 2 verse 44 is pointing to Jesus Christ. That kingdom will not be established until Shiloh come. And we know that is pointing to Jesus Christ. The same prophecy in Zechariah chapter 6, verse 12 and verse 13. Now let us read the great controversy. The great controversy. Page 417. So, the great controversy, page 417. So, let's read the statement. It says here, from page 416. The work of Christ as man's intercessor is presented in that beautiful prophecy of Zechariah concerning him whose name is the branch. Says the prophet, he shall build the temple of the Lord, and he shall bear the glory, and shall sit and rule upon his father's throne, and he shall be a priest upon his throne, and the counsel of peace shall be between them both. Zechariah 6, verse 12 and 13. He shall build the temple of the Lord. By his sacrifice and mediation, Christ is both the foundation and the builder of the church of God. The Apostle Paul points to him as the chief cornerstone, in whom all the building fitly framed together groweth into an holy temple in the Lord, in whom ye also, he says, are builded together for an habitation of God through the Spirit. He shall bear the glory. To Christ belongs the glory of redemption for the fallen race. Through the eternal ages, the song of the ransom once will be unto him that loved us and washed us from our sins in his own blood. To him be glory and dominion forever and ever. Revelation 1, verse 5 and 6. It says, he shall sit and rule upon his throne, and he shall be a priest upon his throne. Not now, upon the throne of his glory, the kingdom of glory has not yet been ushered in. Not until his work as a mediator shall be ended will God give unto him the throne of his Father, a kingdom of which there shall be no end. Now, the statement is very plain. Not until his work as mediator shall be ended. Now, since we as shepherds and believers fully believe that that kingdom will be established by Jesus Christ prior to the close of provision, and we fully believe that Sister White and B.T. Hall, both of them were inspired by the same Spirit. And there is no possibility that they will contradict each other. So the statement can be easily understood that the work as mediator mentioned there is the work in the holy place. That Jesus Christ will not visit the earth not until his work in the holy place will be ended. Not until his work as a mediator shall be ended. If you will be saying, brothers and sisters, that mediation in the most holy place, then are we saying that the kingdom will be established after the general close of provision? Because Jesus Christ will abandon most holy place. His mediation in the most holy place will be ended in the general close of provision. There are only two mediation of Christ, holy place and most holy place. Let's read tract number 3. Page 18. Tract number 3, page 18. Hence, his mediatorial work begin first in the holy, then in the most holy. Tract number 3, page 18. So Christ's mediatorial work is only in two apartments. First, Christ's mediatorial work in the holy place, then Christ's mediatorial work in the most holy place. The same with the statement in the Great Controversy 419 that God commanded that there must be atonement for both apartments. Quoted in Leviticus 16, verse 16 and verse 19. And atonements means removal. And there are only two removals. Removal of the names of the wicked and removal of the sins of the righteous. Tract number 3, page 9. But since the shepherd's rod plainly told us that the most holy place is blotting out sins, to SR 187 and 189, therefore the blotting out of names is the atonement, the removal of the names of the wicked. That is the atonement in the holy place. So Christ's mediatorial work in the holy place, it is pertaining to the blotting out of names. Of course, the term mediatorial work must be referring only to the righteous. Christ is making intercession to the Father that the names of the righteous will not be blotted out. But the spirit of prophecy is very plain in the Great Controversy 416 and 417. That spiritual temple, that kingdom will not be established not until Christ's mediation will be ended. And since the kingdom of Christ will be established while provisionary time still lingers, it cannot be Christ's mediatorial work in the most holy place because that work will be ended on the general clause of provision. It must be Christ's mediatorial work in the holy place. After Christ's mediatorial work in the holy place will be ended, then Jesus Christ will visit the earth. I would like to read the statement in 1 TG. Number 10 on page 27. It says, 1 TG number 10, page 27. The type also perfectly demonstrates that since God has now risen from His holy habitation, so pointing to the holy place, not most holy habitation. Now, I would like to read again. It says, the type also perfectly demonstrates that since God has now risen from His holy habitation and has taken the reins in His own hands, now let's go back again to the reading in the Old Symbolic Code. It cannot be applied in the days of Jehoshaphat. Because here in the Old Symbolic Code, for Symbolic Code 10 to 12, page 5, it says, taking the reins into his own hands. Taking the reins into his own hands. For Symbolic Code 10 to 12, page 5. As most of our people hardly understand what the spirit prophecy means by the statement, the Lord shall take the reins in His own hands, Testimonies to Ministers, page 300, we are writing the following paragraphs. And remember, it is in Testimonies to Ministers, page 300, saying that the Lord will work out of common order of things. out of common order of things. I think that is the statement. In Testimonies to Ministers, page 300. Let me read to you. Testimonies to Ministers, page 300. It says, "Let me tell you that the Lord will work in this last work in a manner very much out of the common order of things, and in a way that will be contrary to any human planning." That is the protection. God will work in the last work in a manner very much out of common order of things, and in a way that will be contrary to any human planning. The same with the statement, right? In 2TG 11, page 5 and 6, concerning the mustard seed. Contrary to all human expectation. Contrary to any human planning. In reality, that work by which it is out of common order of things is a heavenly one. Because the common order of things is earthly. It is not the desire of God. It is not the desire of God in reality that God would let ancient Israel to establish sanctuary in the wilderness. But God allowed it. There are many things that it is not the desire of God, but God allows it to become a picture to the particular object in view in the last generation of man. Now, I would like to read the statement again. Here, written by Alonzo Jones, Wagoner rather. It says, so let us read. God's desire is found in Exodus 15 verse 17. That is the desire of God. That is God's desire. Found in Exodus 15 verse 17. So let's read again. Exodus 15, 17. Because God's purpose, God's desire will be fulfilled to the last generation of men. When God take out His people from the land of Egypt, it says, "Thou shalt bring them in." That is the desire of God, to bring them where? Into the mountain of thine inheritance. In the place, it says, "O Lord, which thou hast made for thee to dwell in the sanctuary, O Lord, which thy hands have established." God wants His people to brought into that sanctuary But with such sanctuary, it is Jesus Christ that established that sanctuary. Thus, God's purpose had been fulfilled? No. In Prophets and Kings, page 19, it says, but ancient Israel did not fulfill God's purpose. Now, I would like to read to you. It says here, written by A.G. Wagoner. Prophets and Kings, page 19. But ancient Israel did not fulfill God's purpose. Now, I would like to read this statement. It says, but Israel did not believe. You see, they did not believe. Believe what? The promise in Exodus 15, verse 17. I think there is a statement in the writings of B.D. that says that supposed to be they could reach that place less than 2 weeks. Less than 2 weeks. What place? The place by which into that sanctuary, that it is Jesus Christ who established that sanctuary. But even after 40 years ended, even after Joshua died, the purpose of God had not been carried out. Still, you have hard time to find less than 2 weeks. If God's people had been faithful and did not murmur, God would lead them into that place less than 2 weeks. According to the writings of Alonzo Jones as well as the Shepherd's Rod publications. So, 2 weeks only um, 14 days. So, it must be less than 14 days. Supposed to be. Brothers and sisters. But they murmured. And it takes them more than 40 years wandering in the wilderness. But the absolute fact is that God's purpose never been materialized in the days of ancient Israel. And, of course, God's purpose must be fulfilled. I would like to read Prophets and Kings. Here in Prophets and Kings, uh, 713, it says, Prophets and Kings 713, that which God purposed to do for the world through Israel, the chosen nation, He will finally accomplish through His church on earth today. Although the word today is even more applied in our days rather than in the days of Sister White. And it says, 714, these witnesses for God are numbered among the spiritual Israel, and to them will be fulfilled all the covenant promises made by Jehovah to His ancient people. All made by Jehovah to His ancient people will be finally fulfilled unto them. 714 Prophets and Kings. Here in 720, then it is that the redeemed from among men. Of course, that is the 144,000, right? Revelation 14 verse 4. Then it is that the redeemed from among men will receive their promised inheritance. That God's purpose for Israel will meet with literal fulfillment. Now let us go back to ancient Israel. And I know that the true people of God, the 144,000 living saints, unto them, God's purpose, God's promise, will finally be carried out. Now let's read the statement here. It says, but Israel did not believe. It is concerning Exodus 15:17. The promise given by God, that God would bring them to a place, to that sanctuary, by which it is Jesus Christ who established such sanctuary. But Israel did not believe and would not trust the Lord. In their hearts, they turned back to Egypt, so that they never gain what the Lord had designed for them. Instead of coming to the reality, they had only the shadow. Instead of coming to the real sanctuary, they had all their lives only a pattern of it, and one in which they were not permitted to enter at all. Instead of being a kingdom of priests, every one of them entitled to minister before the Lord in the secret places of the Most High, only one family of one tribe were permitted to serve as priests, even in the typical sanctuary. Now, brothers and sisters, God needs people by which, according to Jesus Christ, they don't need shadow. Their eyes focus to the real sanctuary. And while we focus to the real sanctuary, which is in heaven, then Jesus Christ will establish sanctuary on earth. And Jesus Christ will bring the 144,000 by which they were focusing their eyes to the real sanctuary established by the hands of God, not established by the hands of men. And that is why here in 2SR page 187, it says, the true worshippers in the earthly, who by faith look forward to the administration of the heavenly, were credited in the books of heaven as worthy of life eternal. 2SR page 187. Hope that you could find that statement. Less than 2 weeks. If it's not in either in Alonzo Jones or Brother Holter. There are many passages, although my clippings is not found here. It says here, I would like to read this reading. Yet when we consider the matter further, still the writings of Elite Wagoner. Yet when we consider the matter further, the command to build the sanctuary, together with the statement of the reason why it was to be built. Now the question, why is it that it needs for God to let them establish sanctuary? Why is it that it needs for God to give them king? Because they want common order of things. Earthly. Common order of things. They are earthly. God will work in the last days out of common order of things, no longer earthly. Everything is heavenly. Look at the first antitypical spiritual temple. They did establish a building. Or literal. They established literal building as headquarters. All of them focused their eyes to the heavenly sanctuary. I would like to read to you the life of the apostles. Here in let me see. I think it is in 2SP. It's for Prophecy Volume 2. Oh no, it's already in 3SP. The description given by the prophet by which they gathered only on the abandoned places. Oh, I lost the page. 300, I think 356 and 357 in 4SP. It says here, 356 and 357. During the life of Christ on earth, He had sought to lead the Jews out of their exclusiveness. And even Jesus Christ in His parable, right? It says that the Son of Man He has no place even to, what is that parable? It says, verse 20, in Matthew 8, verse 20, and Jesus said unto him, the foxes have holes, and the birds of the air have nets, but the Son of Man hath not where to lay his head. That is Jesus Christ. Does Jesus Christ is staying in the temple? Headquarters? No. Look at Jesus Christ. And even Apostle Paul says in Hebrews, in the book of Hebrews, on chapter 13, verse 13, let us go forth therefore unto him without the camp, bearing his reproach. Now let me read to you the experience here in 4SP 356 and 357. During the life of Christ on earth, He had sought to lead the Jews out of their exclusiveness. The conversion of the centurion and that of the Syrophoenician woman were instances of His direct work outside of the acknowledged people of Israel. The time had now come for active and continued work among the Gentiles, of whom all communities received the gospel gladly and glorified God for the light of an intelligent faith. The unbelief and malice of the Jews did not turn aside the purpose of God, for a new Israel was being grafted into the old olive tree. The synagogues were closed against the apostles, but private houses were thrown open for their use, and public buildings of the Gentiles were also used in which to preach the word of God. You see, brothers and sisters, that is the life of the apostles. They were only meeting on private houses and using public buildings. But look at the Jewish people. We're so proud because they have headquarters. They have the temple. Now let us read again the statement here. Written by Alonzo Jones. When we consider the matter further, the command to build the sanctuary, together with the statement of the reason why it was to be built. Why is it that they need a shadow? Because of their unbelief. Because of their murmuring. Jesus Christ Himself made it so plain. In John chapter 4, it says here, John chapter 4, on verse 23. I would like to begin on verse 20. It says, Our fathers worship in this mountain, and ye say that in Jerusalem is the place where men ought to worship. Jesus said unto her, Woman, believe me, the hour cometh, when ye shall neither in this mountain, nor yet at Jerusalem, worship the Father. Ye worship, ye know not what. We know what we worship, for salvation is of the Jews. But the hour cometh, and now is, when the true worshippers shall worship the Father in spirit and in truth, for the Father seeketh such to worship Him. Who are they, the true worshippers? Worship God in spirit and in truth, but it was even modified here in 2SR 187 by saying that true worshippers in the earthly who by faith look forward to the administration of the heavenly. They were credited in the books of heaven as worthy of life eternal. Now let's read again. It says, Yet when we consider the matter further, the command to build the sanctuary, together with the settlement, together with the statement of the reason why it was to be built, is one of the most sorrowful things to be found in the Scriptures. It is the most sorrowful because that declaration to build sanctuary is only a living emblem of their unbelief. Therefore, brothers and sisters, it says, Thus the tabernacle was at once a witness of God's presence and of the unfaithfulness of the children of Israel. Now let us go back again to our subject. Addressing to the 144,000 living saints scattered throughout the whole world without a shepherd, because they were looking only to that sanctuary which is no longer built by the hand of man. It is the sanctuary built by the man whose name is the branch, the son of David, antitypical Solomon. He will build the temple, antitypical Mount Moriah. To all the 144,000 living saints, look at those people boasting their headquarters. It is abomination in the sight of God. Now, I would like to read for Symbolic Code 10 to 12, page 5. Taking the reins into his own hands. So, we should now focus our attention to heaven order of things, no more common order of things, which is earthly. The common order of things, you need shadow, you need pattern, but in the last work, in the last generation of men, the 144,000 living saints, God's purpose will be finally accomplished to them. They are the people by which they don't need any shadow. They don't need any pattern. All of them focus their attention to the genuine and real sanctuary established by Jesus Christ Himself. Now let us read. It says here, for Symbolic Code 10 to 12, page 5, taking the reins into his own hands. As most of our people hardly understand what the spirit prophecy means by the statement the Lord shall take the reins in His own hands. Testimonies to Ministers, page 300. We are writing the following paragraphs. The foregoing prophetic statement reveals two definite things. First, that the Lord is not now holding the reins in His own hands. And second, that at some time He will do so. It was written 1938. The prophet is very plain. The Lord is not now holding the reins in His own hands. Because that predicted event that Jesus Christ will take the reins into His own hands when He shall grow out of His holy habitation, when He will left the holy place, meaning after Christ's mediatorial work in the holy place will be ended, according to the great controversy 416 and 417. As also stated in 1 TG number 10 on page 27. It says, brethren, the type also perfectly demonstrates that since God has now risen from His holy habitation and has taken the reins in His own hands. 1 TG number 10, page 27. When would be God will take the reins into His own hands? After Jesus Christ shall rise up from His holy habitation in the heavenly sanctuary. In the writings of Sister White, it says, after Christ's mediatorial work is ended, where? In the holy place. Jesus Christ will visit the earth. Brothers and sisters, and this is the very message that we are now proclaiming. Although it was predicted beforehand, according to 1 TG 38:28, that the messenger that God will use, many will reject. And many will say, we don't want this man to reign over us. And we know that they are the enemies of God, as stated in Luke 19, on verse 27. Now let's go back to our subject. The year of the deliverance of God's people. Now, brothers and sisters, we have the two photographs. We have two pictures. The first picture is the Babylonian captivity. When the Babylonian captivity ended, God's people were still in Babylon. Although the prophecy concerning the 70 years captivity ended, as the prophecy recorded in Jeremiah 25 verse 11 and 12, but the sign did not as yet appear, because the sign is found in Isaiah 44 verse 28, Isaiah 45 verse 13, that the king who would reign is Cyrus. And it is after the second year of the reign of Darius. Now, what is antitypical Babylon? Brothers and sisters. So, I would like to focus our attention. What is the antitypical Babylon? The papacy. Right? Now let's read at 2SR. Page 271. 2SR 271. As type destroyed type, so antitype must have destroyed antitype. That is ancient Babylon, the type of the papacy. So what is the type of the papacy? Ancient Babylon. Now, ponder deeply, brothers and sisters. What kingdom that followed after Babylon? Medo-Persia. Because we are looking for the picture, the photograph. Medo-Persia. What is the representation of Medo-Persia? The ram. In Daniel chapter 8, right? And we know that ram represent a male lamb. And that ram has 2 horns. Right? Daniel chapter 8. I think from verse 1 to verse 7. Exactly typifying the 2-horned beast. Brothers and sisters, typifying the 2-horned beast. Now, it is reversed. The sign is reversed because it points out to Darius, the first king of Medo-Persia. But in this study, pointing to the last king of the antitypical Medo-Persia, the last president in the United States of America. And on his second year, the second year of Darius, that is the time that God's people returned from Babylon to Jerusalem. So the same with the antitype, on the last president of the United States of America, pointing to Joseph Biden, he is the last president of the United States of America on the second year of Joseph Biden, 2022. That would be the year of deliverance of God's people. But what deliverance? Deliverance from Babylonian captivity. Because at that time, the woman is riding on the scarlet-colored beast. Therefore, we need to focus our attention to the deliverance on Egyptian bondage, by which the song of Moses will finally be fulfilled. What is the song of Moses? It is not just a song. It is God's promise. Exodus 15 verse 17. Because that song, there is a divine message. God promised, I will bring you into that place by which I will establish the sanctuary. I will be the one to establish that sanctuary. But that promise of God was not carried out to the first Exodus because of their murmuring, their rebellion, brothers and sisters, their unfaithfulness, and their unbelief. And of course, God will not fulfill such promise to those people who are murmuring, brothers and sisters, but only to those people who faithfully believe. That man whose name is the branch, we are now living in that time that Jesus Christ will establish the Now let us read track number 8. Pages 5 and page 6. It says, the 7 lamps, verse 5, being part of the sanctuary fixtures, gives conclusive evidence that the heavenly throne scene occurs in the sanctuary, whereas the subsequent Zion scene takes place upon Mount Zion, the king's earthly palace grounds, not upon Mount Moriah, the sanctuary grounds, where it would necessarily have to take place, were it to denote that the event occurs in the sanctuary. These scenes, therefore, are of two different events in two different locations. Two different events, two different locations. That is very plain. Let us distinctly separate Mount Moriah and let us distinctly separate Mount Zion. Because the temple in Mount Moriah, who established it? Solomon, the son of David. Therefore, in the antitype, the one who will establish that antitypical temple in antitypical Mount Moriah, it must be antitypical Solomon, the son of David, whose name is the branch, which is Jesus Christ. Whereas the temple in Mount Zion, who established that second temple? It is prophets, kings, priests, and governor. There are 4 identities that built that temple in Mount Zion, the second literal temple, built by kings, prophets, priests, and governor. And it is represented by the 4 carpenters. So that literal premillennial kingdom, the physical kingdom, no, it is not the Son of the living God. It is not antitypical Solomon that will establish that kingdom, but rather the 4 carpenters. Now, for example, I would like to read 2SR. It says here, 2SR page 260. It says, and they that are far off shall come and build in the temple of the Lord. As this was untrue with the literal temple, the words must apply to the antitypical one. At that time, the prophet says, and many nations shall be joined to the Lord in that day, and shall be my people. Zechariah 2 verse 11. In that day, that is in the time of the loud cry, a great multitude shall be converted to the church. It says, brothers and sisters. And it is illustrated in Zechariah chapter 1, verse 20 and 21, as the 4 carpenters. Let us read. Timely greetings. It says here, 1TG number 11, page 11. And the Lord showed me 4 carpenters. Zechariah 1 verse 20 and 21. 1TG number 11, page 11. 1TG 11:11. And the Lord showed me 4 carpenters. Then said I, what come this to do? And he spake, saying, these are the horns which have scattered Judah, so that no man did lift up his head. But these are come to pray them, to cast out the horns of the Gentiles, which lifted up their horn over the land of Judah to scatter it. Here the same powers which scattered Judah and Israel are again seen, not as horns, but as carpenters, not to scatter God's people, but to build for them, and to cast out the horns, powers of the Gentiles, those who rule the land. So that is very plain, right? The same with the statement here in symbolic code. 13 symbolic code. Let me see. 1 and 2. On page 4 and 5. 13 symbolic code, 1 and 2, pages 4 and 5. The prophet first saw 4 horns, which perfectly symbolized those Gentile nations which scattered God's people, for horns are used to push and scatter. Afterwards, though he saw 4 carpenters, thus lending the impression that they have come to build, for that is the business of carpenters. When the prophet saw the carpenters, he wanted to know the purpose of their presence. In his answer, the angel first told him that these carpenters are none other than the 4 horns, Gentile nations, which have scattered Israel, Judah, and Jerusalem. And these same horns that scattered Judah, Israel, and Jerusalem had now returned as carpenters to cast out the Gentiles and thus free God's people. It therefore becomes obvious that the 4 horns in which Zechariah first saw point back to the time when Israel and Judah were scattered, and the symbolism of the 4 carpenters must point forward to a time years later when God is to restore and rebuild the kingdom. Briefly, then, symbolism of the horns looks back to the destruction of the kingdom, whereas the carpenters, looks forward to the repairing of it. 13 symbolic code, 1 and 2, pages 4 and 5. But what I'm trying to emphasize that there is a quite difference between the temple to be built in Mount Moriah, or the antitypical temple to be built in Mount Moriah, and the antitypical temple to be built in Mount Zion. The antitypical temple to be built in Mount Moriah, that is sanctuary grounds, whereas the antitypical temple to be built on Mount Zion, that is palace grounds. You see, brothers and sisters, the difference. And besides, the Shepherd's Rod says it is 2 different locations and 2 different events. The antitypical temple to be built in Mount Moriah, it is the son of David, antitypical Solomon, whose name is the branch, which is Jesus Christ. He will be the one to establish that antitypical temple in antitypical Mount Moriah, whereas the antitypical temple in Mount Zion, it is to be built by the 4 carpenters, as illustrated in the type. The second temple was built by kings, prophets, priests, and governor. Therefore, we need to focus first to the antitypical temple to be built in Mount Moriah. And who are they? Who will be brought there? Only those people by which they will no longer exalt anything which is human. The only thing that they will exalt is only the things which is heavenly one. Because they completely understand that all those words are lying words, saying, this is the temple of the Lord, this is the temple of the Lord, are lying words. Jesus Christ will never dwell on any building established by the hands of man. Jesus Christ will dwell only on the things by which His own hands have made. I remember the statement in 1 TG, number 45, page 13. It says, the Lord's next statement, 1 TG 45:13. The Lord's next statement further confirms this fact, for He reiterates that the things which He found were only those things which always were. What does it mean? So I would like to emphasize this reading. It says, the Lord's next statement further confirms this fact. What fact? For He reiterates that the things which He found were only those things which always were. What are those things which Jesus Christ found were only those things which always were? It's easy to understand that all the sanctuary, all the buildings, all the headquarters which is established by the hands of human beings, although under the direction with the Spirit of God, Moses, Joshua, Solomon, Zechariah, Haggai, we have 4 examples recorded in the Bible that those sanctuary, those temple that were made by hands always were apostatized, always were corrupted after those inspired servants of God laid down in their graves. What happened to the headquarters in the Seventh-day Adventist Church after Ellen G. White died? We have the full demonstration. So, in the Old Testament, the question is, where? But in the Stephen sermon, the question is, what? Now let us read first Acts. Acts chapter 7. On verse 48 and 49. It says, howbeit the Most High dwelleth not in temples made with hands, as saith the prophet, heaven is my throne, and earth is my footstool. Then it says, what house will ye build me? What? It says, saith the Lord, or what is the place of my rest? But in Isaiah 66, it says, where? Isaiah 66, verse 1. It says here, thus saith the Lord, the heaven is my throne, and the earth is my footstool. Where is the house that ye build unto me? Where is the place of my rest? So, in the Old Testament, the question is, where? Where is the place? Where is the house that ye build unto me? And the second question is, where is the place of my rest? But in the New Testament, what house will ye build me? What is the place of my rest? Now, if we will be saying where, for example, in the wilderness, did God abide them forever? Is God's presence abide them forever? Now, I would like to read first tract number 2. It says, page 11. When ancient Israel marched out of Egypt, tract number 2, page 11. When ancient Israel marched out of Egypt, the Lord went before them by day in a pillar of a cloud to lead them the way, and by night in a pillar of fire to give them light, to go by day and night. And in the place where the cloud abode, there the children of Israel pitched their tents. Exodus 13 verse 21, Numbers 9:17. But some years after the Israelites movement had marched into the promised land, God withdrew His personal presence from among them because of their great sin, of which they refused to repent. So, where is the place by which God's presence is always there? Where is the place that is only in the wilderness? Historically, when they established permanent headquarters, first in Gilgal, and then in Shiloh, what happened? Great apostasy. Brothers and sisters, that is the historical event. Great apostasy. And the only historical event by which God's presence is abiding God's people, it is the church in the wilderness. Brothers and sisters, it is the church in the wilderness. Not on the very place by which they establish headquarters, permanent location. Now, I would like to read Patriarchs and Prophets 514. Patriarchs and Prophets 514. It says, heretofore Gilgal had been the headquarters of the nation and the seat of tabernacle. You see, the temple represent headquarters. Heretofore, Gilgal had been the headquarters of the nation and the seat of the tabernacle. But now the tabernacle was to be removed to the place chosen for its permanent location. This was Shiloh, a little town in the lot of Ephraim. It was near the center of the land and was easy of access to all the tribes. Here a portion of country had been thoroughly subdued so that the worshippers would not be molested. And the whole congregation of the children of Israel assembled together at Shiloh and set up the tabernacle of the congregation there. The tribes that were still in camp when the tabernacle was removed from Gilgal followed it and pitched near Shiloh. Here the tribes remained until they dispersed to their possessions. The ark remained at Shiloh for 300 years until, because of the sins of Eli's house, it fell into the hands of the Philistines and Shiloh was ruined. The ark was never returned to the tabernacle here. The sanctuary service was finally transferred to the temple at Jerusalem and Shiloh fell into insignificance. But what is the message of Jeremiah to the temple that was built in Mount Moriah? Although Mount Moriah still in the old location, still within Jerusalem. It says, there are only ruins to mark the spot where it once stood. Long afterward, its fate was made use of as warning to Jerusalem. Then Jeremiah says, go ye now unto my place, which was in Shiloh. The Lord declared by the prophet Jeremiah, where I set my name at the first, and see what I did to it for the wickedness of my people Israel. Therefore will I do unto this house, and which is called by my name, wherein ye trust, and unto the place which I gave to you, unto your fathers, as I have done to Shiloh. And that is why B.T. Hotep says in 1 TG 32, page 15 and page 16, it says, Isaiah 30 verse 8, now go, write it before them in a table, and note it in a book, that it may be for the time to come forever and ever. It says, true, they killed the prophets for warning the people of their sin, but God decreed that the prophets' writings against the existing sins must remain intact to be read as object lessons by the generations that were to follow thereafter. God's people of today, therefore, have no excuse for repeating the mistakes of their predecessors. If they do repeat the sins of those who have gone before them, however, then their guilt will bring upon them even greater doom than was brought upon the Jews. And if no one can deny that Isaiah's prophecies against the Jews were fulfilled, then who can dare say that they will not be fulfilled against us if we failed as they did? Well, history repeats itself. That is why God wants 144,000 scattered throughout the whole earth without a shepherd. 1 SR 222. They did not bow their knee to Baal. All of them. God's promise to take them out of Egypt. And what's the promise of God? No. God will no longer establish a shadow, but rather He will fulfill what He promised, that Jesus Christ will establish a sanctuary, a place of worship. Brothers and sisters, by which His own hands, the hands of Jesus Christ, will be the one to establish. I would like to read 2 SR. And soon, very soon, we will be in that place. It says here in 2 SR page, let's read the statement. 264. 2 SR page 264. It says, sing and rejoice, O daughter of Zion. And for lo, I come, and I will dwell in the midst of thee, saith the Lord. Many nations shall be joined to the Lord in that day, and shall be my people, and I will dwell in the midst of thee. Zechariah 2 verse 10 and 11. Yea, many people and strong nations shall come to seek the Lord of hosts in Jerusalem. It says, the church without reference to locations, and to pray before the Lord. What is the statement? The church without reference to location. So it points out to the church, wherever the church by which God's presence is among them, that is the church in the wilderness. Why is it that it says without reference to location? Because that church is moving. Brothers and sisters, that church is moving. Represented by chariot. The chariot will be taken by the bay horses. Taken out from Egypt. And then, that is the church without reference to location. So I would like to re-emphasize again the statement here in 1 TG number 45, page 30, saying, let's begin in page 12, by saying, the heaven is my throne, and the earth is my footstool. The Lord actually says that He has not forsaken the earth, that though His throne is in heaven, His feet are still on earth, that He is still interested in His people. But the questions, where is the house that ye build unto me? And where is the place of my rest? Sadly revealed that the work has been neglected. So that question, brothers and sisters, in reality, the work has been neglected. The history in the past has been repeated. Because they were satisfied. They could see the building. And not only satisfied, they become boastful. It says here, the statement, and where is the place of my rest? Sadly revealed that the work has been neglected, that neither a house nor a place of rest has been prepared for him. You see, that is the statement given by the voice of inspiration. There is not a house, neither a place that has been prepared for God. God cannot dwell in such house, in such place by which only boasting that can be heard. Brothers and sisters, I remember the statement in the writings of Waggoner. It says here, let's read. It says, will God indeed dwell on the earth? So, let's read the statement. Will God indeed dwell on the earth? Behold, the heaven and heaven of heavens cannot contain thee. How much less this house that I have builded? 1 Kings chapter 8 verse 27. That is why it is really, is that very embarrassing Because look at the attitude of Solomon. There is no more temple on this earth that will exceed the magnificence of that temple. BT Hotep says, the worth of that temple that was built in Mount Moriah, let us read. It says here, and 1 SR. It says, 166. That beautiful temple reveals God's desire for His church. For this reason, God lavished so much wealth upon this palatial structure, upon Mount Moriah. According to estimates given in the monthly bulletin of the Illinois Society of Architects, it reached the tremendous total of more than $87 billion. The several estimates show the total cost to have been $87,212,210,840 US dollar. This sum represents a nation's wealth. You see, brothers and sisters? Can you imagine? But at the dedication, did Solomon boasted that temple? No, he said that do not trust into this temple because God will not dwell in the temple made by hands. Now let us read again the statement here. It says, Solomon knew it well. Let's read. Solomon knew it well, for at the dedication of the temple that he built, which was far larger and grander than the first tabernacle, he said, what is the thing by which Solomon knew very well? That there is no temple on this earth built by the hands of men that we can boast. It says, this is the statement given by Solomon in 1 Kings chapter 8 verse 27. Will God indeed dwell on the earth? Behold, the heaven and heaven of heavens cannot contain thee. How much less this house that I have builded? 1 Kings chapter 8 verse 27. Then it says, what then is God's dwelling? What then is God's dwelling place? Then it says, He Himself indicated it when after asking, that is found in Isaiah 66 verse 1. You know Isaiah 66 verse 1 is applied in reality this very year. It says, He Himself indicated it when, after asking, where is the place that ye build unto me? Where is the place of my rest? He said, but to this man will I look, even to him that is poor and of a contrite spirit, and trembleth at my word. So what does it mean, brothers and sisters? Because the answer is found in verse 2. It says, but to this man will I look, even to him that is poor, and of a contrite spirit, and trembleth at my word. In the shepherd's rod, it says here, I would like to read 1 TG 45, page 13. Then by saying, but to this man will I look, even to him that is poor and of a contrite spirit, that trembleth at my word, he positively makes known that his unfaithful servants are discharged from his work. Discharged from his work. Who are they? It cannot be the Seventh-day Adventist leadership. Because the Seventh-day Adventist leadership was already discharged in 1930. But here in page 12, let us read 1TG number 45, page 12. We are to study the 66th chapter of Isaiah. In this chapter, the Lord speaks to two groups of servants. The servants up to the cleansing of the sanctuary, up to the judgment for the living, the purification of the church. Who are they, the servants that had been discharged? Those servants by which their boundary line is only up to the judgment for the living, the purification of the church. That is the blotting out of names in the heavenly sanctuary. So one subject connect the other. And without any doubts, that was already finished. March 27, 2021. By which in Bible calendar, that is October 10, 2022. The seven antitypical brothers of David, their period of time was completely ended, and all of them were discharged of the Lord on that day of atonement, March 27, 2021. That is very plain in this reading in 1TG 45, page 13. That verse 2, saying, but to this man, let's read again. 1TG 45, on page 13. Then by saying, but to this man will I look, even to him that is poor and of a contrite spirit, that trembleth at my word. The man mentioned here must be the man by which appointed by Jesus Christ to take in when God will take the reins into his own hands by someone else. And this man is antitypical David. Right? In track number 8, on page, let's read track number 8 on page 71. Observe that in the message which they sent after him, his servants did not say, we will not have you to reign over us, but rather we will not have this man to reign over us. What the objective to was Christ reigning over them through someone else. Clearly then, before he is coronated and prior to his return to reckon with his servants, he appoints a man to reign over them in his stead. Whereupon they say to him, by their attitude and stand toward his message, we will not have this man to reign over us. Although this man, as we now see, is the antitypical David, the simple means the visible king. You see, brothers and sisters, who is that man? That is antitypical David, the visible king. Now let's read 1TJ 45, page 13. Then by saying, but to this man will I look, even to him that is poor and of a contrite spirit, that trembleth at my word. He positively makes known that his unfaithful servants are discharged from his work. So they have been discharged. To repeat again, it cannot be the Seventh-day Adventist leadership because they were already discharged in 1930. The only servants recognized by God as his since 1930 is the Davidian. No longer the Seventh-day Adventist Church. So I would like to read two symbolic code. Number 10 on page 6. The foregoing statement simply means that God limited to the leaders of the Seventh-day Adventist denomination 1 year in which to accept the sealing message and to carry it to the church through the instrumentality of the old organization, and that if they still continued after the expiration of this limited period of grace to reject the message, he would spew them out of his mouth to reject them as his servants. And then it says, and that now since this limited period of grace has expired, so it was already expired, therefore, the Seventh-day Adventist leadership in 1931 was already rejected by God. No longer God's servants. So the servants from 1930, first, it is pointing to antitypical JC from 1930 to 1955. But from 1955 to March 27, 2021, that is pointing to the 7 antitypical brothers of David. And according to the reading in 1 TG 45:13, their boundary line is up to the judgment for the living. The purification of the church, which pointing to the bookwork in the heavenly sanctuary. Blotting out of names. And instead of knowing what is going on in the heavenly sanctuary, there are many shepherds that believers that they were mocking and deriding such message. But I know the true people of God, the 144,000 living saints, they will gladly accept this message. So, brothers and sisters, the statement is very plain. Let us read again. It says in 1 TG 45:13, then by saying, but to this man will I look, even to him that is poor and of a contrite spirit, that trembleth at my word. He positively makes known that his unfaithful servants are discharged from his work, that others poor and of a contrite spirit, who trembleth at his word, have taken their places, that what the former servants have failed to do, the latter will do. At the same time, he charges the former servants that they feel rich in spirit and in need of nothing more, that they do not fear his word. Hence the servants who are to build him a house and to make a place for his rest are to be men of a poor and of a contrite spirit, men who trembleth at his word, men who are not proud and boastful, but who are teachable and mindful of his word, men who are penitent and see themselves in need of everything instead of in need of nothing. 1 TG number 45 on page 13. So, brothers and sisters, to repeat again, on the year 2021, this is the very year by which the Son of the living God, the man whose name is the bronze, antitypical Solomon, Jesus Christ, he will build the spiritual temple, the spiritual kingdom, and it is represented by antitypical Mount Moriah. This year 2021, and on the next episode, we will tell you the specific date of this year. But the year 2022, that is the literal, physical, premillennial kingdom to be established in Mount Zion. So, first, deliverance from Egyptian bondage, also illustrating deliverance from Assyrian yoke, but the premillennial, literal, physical kingdom, that is the deliverance from Babylonian yoke, from Babylonian confederacy, that is deliverance from Babylonian captivity. So, gradually, with the help of the Lord, we will share to you all the abundance of evidences, impregnable proofs, infallible proofs, brothers and sisters, that our evidences is more stronger than the evidences in the days of Daniel, in the days of Moses. We have more proofs. We have more evidences, concrete and infallible. So thank you very much for listening and viewing this program. We love you, brethren, and hoping that all of us will see eye to eye when God will establish His kingdom. First on Mount Moriah and then to Mount Zion. So may the good Lord bless you and have a beautiful, wonderful evening.